Recording. Okay, folks, we are recording. This is going to be super informal, and it is welcome to the Stamp Club. If you are a member and you weren't able to be here today, welcome, welcome. Everybody who's on, feel free to leave your mics open because it's just, this is a discussion. So if you want to, get yourself off mute, whatever you want to do, it's perfectly fine. And today we are going to be thinking about calendars for 2023. It's amazing to me that it's less than a month and we're going to be in 2023. That just sounds so space aged. 2020 is 3 years ago now. And yes, we've all gone through a heck of a lot with the pandemic and everything. But today I primarily want to focus on a super fun calendar. This is what it looks like. And it actually stands up by itself. Not on my hand incredibly well, but it will stand on a table. And it's just fun. It uses up a bunch of scrap or extra designer series paper, some that's current, some that is retired. It's also using a really nice download of a calendar from Concord and Ninth. And if anybody from Concord and Ninth ever sees this, thank you for sharing your phenomenal download because it's super fun to make into calendars. And if we have time, I'll also show you a couple of tips and tricks on using a stamp set that Stampin' Up! Has, which is called Days to Remember, on making some calendars with this. There are definitely some tips and tricks to keep in mind when you're doing that. But I'm going to flip this over to the overhead camera. And we're just going to kind of jump in. So let me show you where we're heading. This is an example, and it's just an example because it's going to spark a whole bunch of ideas. And it's on some hooks, and you can simply flip over the months. And it also, it's probably not going to show incredibly well on the camera, but you can stand it up. It will stand up on your desk, and it's just stinking cute. I brought it in for my husband to look at last night. He's my best critic. And I showed it to him, and the first thing he said was, I really like that. So when he says that, I know I've got a winner. And that made me feel good. So here's what I did. And we're going to kind of do this in steps. I've taken some shortcuts. I didn't think that watching me die cut and pick out paper and all of that was going to be super exciting. So what I did to make the calendar, I went into my stash of designer series paper and I picked out some pieces that I thought would be fun for different months. And some of these, like I said, are current. Actually, all of these are retired, but some of the ones I used are current. So this one I chose for January in a second calendar that I'm going to do. This one I chose for May flowers. I thought that was kind of fun. This one was super bright and looked hot weather. So that's going to be for August. And then this one is for December. So you don't need designer series paper. You can do this completely with cardstock. You can just do whatever makes your little heart happy. And then the next thing I did is I rummaged through the different pieces of cardstock that I had and colors, and I sort of paired them up with the designer series paper. So this is a really light green from a couple years ago. Please don't ask me what the color is. I'm desperately looking to see if I have an ink pad nearby, and I don't, but I thought it went really, really well with that. So I pulled that out. And seafoam, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, anytime.
And then this was Grapefruit Grove from a couple years ago. So I picked that out. I thought that went really well with the one I picked for May. And then I got into a rut because I found a color that worked really well with the two that are left. This is my favorite red. It's Cherry Cobbler. I thought that worked well with August. And the rec continued into December because it's also going to be what I'm going to use for December. So in order to construct the calendar, what I would suggest is if you have some concentric dies, and you're probably sick of me using these, but I will forever and ever have these as one of my top dies. These are the rectangle stitched dies from Stampin' Up, and there are 13. I'm going to use the largest and the second largest. Those are going to be the two that I'll use to cut out. The largest is going to be for the cardstock. The second largest is going to be for the designer series paper. So I'm going to start with that. And, you know, obviously you can use many different dies or cut out the paper. You don't need dies. You just need to figure out what size it is that you want. And the beauty of this is you've got a ton of freedom because the size of your finished calendar is really kind of up to you. This frame measures about 3 3/4 wide by about, this is the largest one, by about 5 1/4 or so. So if you wanted to cut your cardstock and not deal with a die, maybe you would want to cut your cardstock pieces that you're going to use to be about 3 1/4 by about, I'm sorry, 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. And that's just an estimate. You can come up with whatever you would like. But for each of the cardstock pieces, I used the largest die in the rectangle stitched dies. And I simply ran that through and I got my pieces. But do what you want. Then the second largest die is what I used to cut out my designer series paper. And if you want an approximate measurement, just for sake of argument, that's about 3 1/2-ish by about 4 3/4. So 3 1/2, 4 3/4. So it's about 1/2 inch less in width and in height than that first die that we looked at. So what I did for each of them is I cut out my designer series paper. So I cut those into 4 pieces. And then I can just match them up with the pieces that I chose for the cardstock in the background. This to me was the part that took a few minutes because I'm sure you're like me. I've got, unfortunately, a ton of designer series paper and also a ton of cardstock. So I wanted to just find some color combinations that were going to work. And you don't need 4 or 2 or 5 to try this out. Just grab one. You can just grab one piece of cardstock, one piece of designer series paper that work together pretty well, and cut a couple pieces out just as a trial run to see how this is going to work. All right, so each of the pieces, I'm just going to pull out the calendar. We're going to take a look at January as an example. So each of these pieces has a piece of cardstock. We've already talked about that. Has a piece of designer series paper. And then it's got this little calendar. And I got all of the calendars from that download that I forwarded. It's the one from Concord and Knight. And I'll make sure that it's included in any notes that I send out. This is one page of it. This is February and March as an example. It prints on I think it's 8 sheets of 8.5 by 11. And this can be used for so many things. I'm going to show you a couple of other ideas as well. But if you print it off, one thing I would suggest is mark however you want to. I just put an abbreviation for the months to give me an idea. The good thing is that included in this download is a full calendar with all the months for 2023. So if you forget what month is what, you've got a cheat sheet. And I want to show you one thing I did with that cheat sheet. I actually made this calendar that I'm going to put on my desk. And this was from the download. So this was from one of the pages that printed off. You also get 2023 on the download. And I used a frame that many of us got last year or something similar. These are Tollsby frames. You can get them many different places. I got mine on Amazon. And it measures, it's meant for a 4x6 picture. So I cut out the January through June as a 4x6. I cut out the July through December as a 4x6. Then I die cut the 2023 twice, and I just put that on the top of the frame. So I tend to like being able to see a lot of months on a calendar at one time. And this is just going to sit on my desk. So here's another thing you can do with that download, or grab another 4x6 calendar and you can pop those in. But let me show you just what I found was kind of easy. And again, it's going to probably spark some things that you may or may not want to do with that download. I'll show you how I cut out each of the months. So super simple. First thing I did was, like I said, I marked the months, and I probably didn't absolutely need to do that, but for me it was easy and it took just a minute or so to do. Then I'm going to cut these at 5.5, and it's not going to cut perfectly down the middle. It doesn't matter because we're not at the point of really trying to get anything perfectly set for any purpose. And then what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that each of the calendars that I cut out, that they were the same size, just because I wanted it to look purposeful. So the way I did that was I dragged out these lovely dies one more time. And I used one of the dies. It's the 5th largest one. So if I just count down, it is the 5th largest. And I'll tell you what that measures just in case you want to know, or grab something that you have. This is about 2 1/4 by about, let's see, about 3 5/8, something like that. 2 1/4, 3 5/8, we'll call it. The reason I chose this die was I could very easily put that right around the calendar and just run it through my die cut machine and cut out the calendars month by month, which is what I did. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and you guys are going to say, I know that, you don't need to tell me. Look at a couple of the months for the year. Look at April as an example. If you include in your die cut the Sunday through Saturday, and then all of the weeks, April is an example of the fact that you're going to need a die that will include 7 rows, because you've got 6 rows that have numbers, and then you have 1 row that has the initials. So I wanted to make sure, and I took April as an example, and I wanted to make sure that this die was big enough so that it would capture everything in that month. And I used that die for all the months anyway, because again, I wanted to make sure that they were the same size. So I just got out, and I've got a couple of examples. So for January, I cut out my January calendar, and I continued to be a little bit crazy. And I just put January on the back because inevitably I'm going to get these all mixed up. And I just want to know what month I'm dealing with. And for May, I've got my May with May on the back. For July, no, I'm sorry, August. Here's my August. And then for December, I've got my December. So I've got my 4 months of the ones that I'm just going to quickly put together. And then the last thing that I chose to do was I wanted to add the month to the calendar. And there are a ton of ways to do this. You could go into your computer, into a Word document, a PowerPoint slide, whatever you want to do. You can actually obviously create a list of the months that you want to add, put in whatever font you want, and print that off, and then die cut it or punch it, whatever makes you happy. What I ended up doing, because I have this, is I got out my Days to Remember stamp set, and I just went through and I literally stamped the months. And what's kind of nice is after you die cut your month, this was my May. This started off as May. This is where I die cut out my May. So this ended up being where May used to be. That's how I die cut that. And then I was able to use this piece of white paper. We're all frugal. I didn't want to waste paper. So I stamped the 4 months that I had in the example that I'm going to put together. And I used the double oval punch to stamp them out. And I wanted to show you, this is, I think, a really great idea, because let me show you January as an example, actually December, because I have that one on top. So here's my December. And when I get the pieces that I'm going to be using, so here are the ones we've talked about. And then when I punched out December, I got 2 parts because that punch is going to punch out 2 things. I have this, for me, an oval, the scalloped oval, that I can kind of play around with and see where do I want to put my month before I commit to really kind of setting it down. So it was kind of a good way for me to eyeball how I wanted to put everything together. Then the last thing that I did for each month, and this was what I decided on, you're going to come up with your own thing, is I wanted to give the month a little height. So each of the months is on with dimensionals, and behind each of the months, I used the scalloped oval in that double oval punch. And I picked either a coordinated color, maybe not the color of the cardstock in the background. And sometimes it was different. And I went ahead and I punched out those ovals. And then I used an embossing folder, and I was super happy. This was on the clearance rack the other day. I don't know if it's still there or not, but this is my favorite, probably of all time, the Tasteful Textile. And I went ahead and I just put these in that embossing folder, ran it through to give it a little bit of texture. So I'm just going to take one of these, or maybe 2, and really quickly put them together. It is not anything that is hard at all. You'll get into a real pattern when you put these together. So I'm just going to kind of construct this. What I found fun too is as I was going through the pieces that I had already cut, there were a couple times when the back side of the designer series paper ended up being what I really used because I liked it better. And it was just kind of a fun process. So because these are concentric, they're going to fit together really well. Just trying to get it as centered as I can. And then when you put your calendar on and you figure out where you want to put your date, play around with what looks good. You have options. You're going to be able to put some so that they're up at the top. And if you've got a month like this, where you've got a lot of blank space after that last, in this case, Sunday, you can scooch the month kind of up into the calendar if you want. And one thing that I tried to do is I tried to place the months, especially when I went from one month to the other. I tried to put those months, since they're going to be popped up, in different places. In other words, I didn't always put the month on the bottom right-hand corner. January was bottom right-hand corner, February kind of top center, bottom center, bottom right, top left. And the reason for that was when this is all put together, you don't want it so that everything is in the bottom right, because then it's gonna go wonky. It's gonna kind of look like that, where it's gonna all pop out in the same place. So think about how you might want to orchestrate it a little differently, and you'll figure out what works best for you. And I also try to keep a full design. Like, I like that little ginger person, so I'm going to make sure that he or she is completely visible.
Watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
And then, hey, Crystal.
Hey, Crystal. Sorry, I thought I was on mute. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Don't worry about it.
You're fine. Don't worry about it. I am driving back to North Carolina.
All right. Well, drive carefully.
All right. Well, drive carefully.
And I can hear an echo, so if you don't mind muting, that would be awesome. Thank you, ma'am. So when you put these on, if you use these dies or anything that has a measurement that's kind of close, you're going to be able to center on the cardstock. You'll be able to center that calendar by getting about the same amount of space on the left and on the right. And if it's not perfect, don't worry about it. And then all I did for each one of these is I put on the bottom part of the label, if we want to call it that, by month. And I tried to get it sort of straight just by looking at it from different angles. And when it looked good enough, I was happy. And then I got out some dimensionals, because again, I did want to give this a little bit of height. And I think these were leftovers from a paper pumpkin kit from a while ago. So I'm just putting a couple of these on, making sure that I get some kind of in the middle, so the middle doesn't sag. And then I'm just going to pop that on, make sure I get everything off of that. And sorry if you can see my head. Just trying to get that kind of centered. And there's my December. And I'm going to see if I did December the same way in here. I didn't. That's fine. On this December, I brought it up to the top. So each one of these is going to look a little bit different. And heck, that's part of the fun, because this designer series paper was not as intentional as the one that I just used, where I really want to make sure that some of those particular elements are shown. I'm just going to do one more because I will be putting this all together. And let me pick one. Let's see. I will do, let me do May. I'll do that one. No, I'm going to lie to you. I'm going to do August, and I'm intentionally choosing that one. I love this paper, and I confess to you that I hoarded some of it. So now that I have it and I have a good use for it, and that I dared to cut it, I will be able to use it for even more. I think it was Art Gallery, if I remember the name of it correctly. So I'm just putting another one of these together and centering it up as well as I can. And then for this one, I think I'm going to bring the calendar down a little bit more. I really want some of these colors because there are a bunch of colors up at the top. I want them to be able to be seen pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one just a little differently. And you will find when you're working on this with different patterns that you're going to choose to put the calendars in different places automatically. And that's going to help too, so that they're not all stacked the same way. And that won't give you that bubble in all the different areas. So here's my August. Now I could choose a different color if I wanted. Maybe I could use like Rococo Rose, which is what I think this is, or a green, and really pull those out. I'm looking at what I've already got cut out here to see if any of these would work. Oh, I'm going with that. We're switching this out. I'll come back and I'll change it later. So I really like that because it definitely highlights the colors and it's going to pull that background out a little bit more. Let me make sure I'm not lying to you. Yeah, I like that one better. I think that's the Grapefruit Grove. So we're going to go ahead and stick that on. Now, also, I can pull this over to one side. I can make that one a little off center, just because I can. And that way the yellow is going to show in the background as well. So, yep, I'm overthinking this, but oh well. There are worse things that I could be doing, right? And just try to get that kind of as straight as I can. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop on these fun little dimensionals. I wish I had invented these. Whoever did is brilliant. And these small ones, I don't feel as guilty when I use a lot. The big ones I will cut in half, especially on something about this size. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pop that on here. And again, I apologize if you're seeing my head. Just trying to get that kind of straight. Okay. So this is a good example of a couple of months where intentionally the calendars are at different heights, the months are at different locations, and the themes obviously are different as well. And I'm going to continue down that path and put together each of the months that I have. And I'm going to show you in just a minute how you can pull this together and make that stand-up calendar. But I wanted to pause because there are a lot of other things that you can do with calendars like this, or with calendars that you create with stamp sets. Think about this as a birthday card. This could be the front of a birthday card that would have a circle, and there is a circle stamp that is in the Days to Remember, but there are also many other ways that you can make a circle, or many other circle stamps. But you can see, trying to balance, and that's not working. There's a circle stamp right here. So I could send this to a friend of mine has a birthday August 4th. I could put a big circle around that and say a day to remember, or it's your day, happy birthday, and make that part of the card. And there are other things that could be done. Maybe there's a party. So it could be you're invited, and put the circle around the date, and then on the inside, put in all the information about an invitation to a party, an anniversary, a save the date for a wedding, a shower. There are many, many things that you can do with these so that it's not just a calendar. And it's so personalized if you've got a really pretty calendar for somebody's birthday with that individual's birthday circled. So just an idea. But getting back to the calendar. So once you have the 12 months done, and that will take a couple of minutes, again, choosing the papers that you're going to use and really getting everything pulled together so that you like the design that you're coming up with will take the most time. And then going through and gluing all of this will take a little bit of time as well. But when you're done, the next step is to punch holes so that you can either use these are binder rings. And I'll show you the case that I got these from in a minute. You can get these on Amazon. You can use binder rings, you can use ribbon, you can use twine, you can use whatever you want. But it's pretty important that you get those holes in the same place on each of your calendars. So let me show you a really easy way to do that. If you cut out one more piece, and in my case, I cut it out with the largest die, the one that I use for the cardstock. If you cut out your paper, just cut out one more in the same size as the cardstock, as this piece. And then you're going to make a jig or a template. And what I did is I came in, this is 1/2 inch from the side and 1/2 inch from the top. And then on this side, this is 1/2 inch from the top and 1/2 inch from the side. So I simply got out my ruler, and I love T rulers. They're very, very, very easy to use. So I got out my ruler, I drew a line that was 1/2 inch all the way over. Here's my line. So I drew a line that was 1/2 inch all the way. And then I went back, and at the 1/2 inch point, I put a circle on that line from either side. And where I drew that circle, so I drew my circle, and then I used a tool. I don't know if you guys have one of these. This is showing how long I have been in crafting. This is a crocodile. And this is a tool that was popular, oh my goodness, probably 15 years ago, if not more. It's super cool. It will punch different size holes. This also used to be good for setting eyelets. I am showing how long I have been doing crafting, because there are different ways you can do that and all sorts of fun things that this does. But I used about 1/8 of an inch hole. It really doesn't matter what size you use. And I went ahead and on my template, I punched out those holes. So this is going to be what I'm going to use to make sure that I get the holes in the place that I want. Once I have that jig set up, I'm going to put it behind each of the months, and I'm going to take a pencil. And I've got it so that it is lined up. This is the top of the month. And I'm just going to take a pencil and I'm going to go around that circle and just try to get it as dark as I can. And then I am going to punch the hole. But there is a super, super cool trick that I want to share with you about punching a hole. And let's think about this. This is paper. This paper is going to be moved around a lot. And because it's paper, it's going to have the tendency potentially to tear. So there is a super easy way to reinforce paper before you punch a hole in it. Scotch tape. And all I'm going to do is right over each of those places that I put that pencil mark, I'm going to put a piece of Scotch tape. So I just put a little piece of Scotch tape right over where I'm going to punch that hole. Put the tape on before you punch the hole, not after you punch the hole, because after you punch the hole, you're going to have tape over a hole and it's not going to work. I know that sounds silly, but how do I know that? I'm talking from experience. So I'm putting tape, and you don't need to use a lot. It doesn't need to be the same size. And you're just going to put that right over the back and then punch your hole. And for me, I'm using my little crocodile. You can use whatever you have, and you're going to be able to see where you mark that hole because you drew that circle. And I'm just going to get these two done. And because I have that template, I can be assured that, you know, the next time I punch one out, it's going to be in the same place. And I've got a little piece of paper stuck. So I'm just going to get that out. And I'm just going to punch that hole out. And because I use the template, my two calendars have holes in the same place because it's going all the way through. Once you have all of your months together, so you have them pulled together, you have whatever kind of designs, and this is the beginning. You could put flowers, you could put ribbons, you could put whatever you want and make them even higher stacked. It's really the sky's the limit. This is where you're going to pull all 12 of your pages together and then put them together. The binder rings that I have, I got a lot of them, and they were not expensive. They were from Amazon. They measure 1 inch. They come in different sizes, but the diameter of these is 1 inch. I'm sure I'm not lying to you. I am not lying to you. And they're super cool. I used these on some calendars last year, and they've got a bunch of different purposes. And I simply took these, and the way I put them on is I started with the back if you're going to use these, because if you use these, they have a part that is a bit bigger, that where the hinge is. So the first month that I put on was December, and I added all the way up to January because I wanted to make sure that that part that has the area where they come together kind of in the back. And I just added all of them on and ended up with this. And when it's lying down, it's pretty flat because, again, I intentionally tried to get the months that I was putting on dimensionals in different places. And then when I want to change it to February, I'm just going to flip it over. And I can take that binder ring off if I want to and just put them all back or not. And then if you pull the bottom apart so it fans out a little bit, it will stand. And now I'm staring at February. So here's my February, and I can just continue to flip them month by month. If you don't want to use the binder rings, you can also put ribbon. Just put the ribbon through your holes. You can tie the ribbon wherever you want that to be. You can use twine. You can use whatever you want to put them together. And I did experiment. I was really thinking it would be super cool This is one of the Tollsby frames. I was thinking it would be really cool if I could hang it from the Tollby frame. It's a little bit too big. But I'm not convinced that there's not a way that I'll be able to figure out how to do that. So that's one way to use these and have a really cool calendar. The other way, and I just want to show you what I did from last year as an example, and you will get the idea. Again, it's using one of these frames, and it's a Tollsby frame. They come like this. You just take them apart, and it includes a couple pieces of, it's kind of plexiglass that's in here. What's really cool about this frame is that the memories and more cards that we have are 4x6. So you can rummage through any kinds of memory and more cards that you have and pick out some that you think go really well with particular months. Cut out that calendar. Last year, I went in and added in the month, and you can just pop those right in to the frame or any kind of 4x6 frames. And since these are double-sided and open, I always had the current month and the next month. So that's another idea. So I'm going to pause this recording because I want to check in with everybody, and I want to do a separate one because I'm going to do a quick how to use the Days to Remember stamp set. And then I'm going to do a longer one on the Days to Remember that I'll probably record and post. But I'm going to stop this recording.